Translocation by Are Thoresen, Chapter 1, My Background and Insights, the Implications of Translocation within Clairvoyance, an important tool to enter paranormal levels of consciousness. All of my earlier books are each about a specific part of the spiritual world and the experiences I have had in that part. Poplar is about the spiritual experiences I had in nature, especially with trees, leading back to early childhood. Sevenfold Way to Therapy is about the spiritual experiences I had in developing my therapeutic methods, especially relating to the so-called first-class lectures of Rudolf Steiner given in 1924. The Forgotten Mysteries of Atlantis is about the spiritual experiences I had in understanding my personal karma, especially in relation to my work. Alternative Veterinary Medicine is about the spiritual experiences I had as a veterinarian in trying to find my way from the materialistic medicine of today towards a more spiritual practice. Demons and Healing is about the spiritual experiences I had in meeting the demonic entities causing disease and creating misfortune. Spiritual Medicine is about the spiritual experiences I had resulting in the later development of my therapeutic methods, especially in the finding of the Christ force that resides in the middle of everything, and also in understanding the huge danger and illusionary scam that 5-element acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, has led us into. Experiences from the Threshold is about the experiences I have had in passing the threshold. These books are all about one thing: to understand man, nature, plants, animals and medicine from a spiritual world view. By spiritual world view, I mean a world view based on the existence of spirits. Spirits are behind and are fundamental to all material existence, to plants, animals, and man, yes, to the whole earth. The spiritual world is also behind all kinds of diseases, how they are created and how they spread. To be able to write the books referred to here, I had first to cross the threshold to the spiritual world. The techniques I have used to do so I call translocation of spiritual parts of my total spiritual composition. To write the medical books and practice my way of medicine, I have to understand and being able to either translocate or transform the spiritual entities causing disease, the demonic forces. Translocation and transformation is thus central in all my work, actions and understanding. Therefore, I will now write this book about the fundamental techniques all my books rest on. Translocation as the cause of disease and of spiritual movability and initiation. Transformation as the cause of healing and spiritual development. In my book Spiritual Medicine, I explain the spiritual foundations of my therapeutic methods, especially related to the Christ force. To use this Christ force, I have to transform, and not translocate, the adversarial forces causing disease and hindering Christ, namely the Aramanic, Azuric, and the Luciferic forces. This book is meant to explain the deeper foundations of all my books. It is based on my own experiences, my own understanding, and my own clairvoyant observations within human medicine, veterinary medicine, spirituality, and the development of clairvoyance, founded on conscious translocation, then followed by a possible transformation if that is possible. It is also based on the teachings of Rudolf Steiner through his anthroposophy and anthroposophic medicine, Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, Peter Dunov, the world master from Bulgaria. As a scientifically trained veterinarian and healthcare professional, I realize that this book will be controversial. However, I would like to ask the reader to suspend judgment and take the opportunity to enter through a door to a world that is as valid to me as the physical world is to all of us. I accept the things that I am about to tell you because for me, they have always been as commonplace as the book you are reading or the chair you are sitting upon. My hope is that this book will be able to reach and to appeal to a larger audience than those vested in material medicine. I believe that this information is critical for all who care for suffering and sick humans and animals, from the ravages of chronic disease, and for those of us trying our best to help them. Therefore, I will attempt to present a clear and straightforward picture of what is really happening beyond the vowed existence of the material world in as an honest and personal approach as I can. I feel that the best place to begin this journey is with my own personal account of how I came to actually see and understand spiritual entities, pathological entities, demons, spectres and phantoms, animals in relation to humans and disease in its generality. As a child, due to a certain gift of clairvoyance and also a certain degree of Asperger's syndrome, I always assumed that everyone else felt, saw and analysed the world in the same way as I saw, felt, analysed and explained the same phenomena. How to enter the spiritual world. Throughout my entire life I have tended to leave my body, excarnate. This ability to separate a part of my spiritual makeup from the rest of my soul or from my physical body, and to bring my consciousness or I consciousness to part with the separated spiritual parts, appeared to others, including myself during the 21st years, as if I had a form of epilepsy. What I now know is that this was actually the ability to enter the spiritual world using a methodology that I will describe in this book. This method I call separating or translocating. To understand this, we must first describe the so-called physical body and the spiritual body, which consist of the etheric body, the astral body, the sentient soul, the intellectual soul, the consciousness soul, and the I. I will also describe which parts can be translocated and which parts cannot. The physical and material body. The physical body is not as simple as we at first might believe, neither in its material aspect or in its spiritual aspect. For the spirit to be able to materialize, to become physical, and then for the physical to incorporate material substance, to actually become material, there are deep and hidden secrets that few understand. When I was a young medical student, I arrogantly thought that I understood the physical body, that it was just material substances gathered in a system based on chemistry and logic. Later, when I understood that the physical realm, with its material substances, its space and time, Einstein and quantum theory, actually was one of the most difficult things or areas of cosmos or dimensions to understand, I totally changed my opinion. Here we will not try to embark on a deeper understanding of what physical and material means. We will just consider the physical material body as a power structure through which we can enter the spiritual world as an alternative portal to entering the spirit through the etheric body, the soul or the astral body. So, how is it possible to enter the spiritual world through the physical material body? As I have vaguely explained, the physical body is a lot more spiritual than we think, even more spiritual than the etheric or the astral body. To use this physical body as an entrance to the spirit, we have to awaken the I consciousness within the different parts of the physical material body, and then separate, translocate this part somewhat from the rest. Then we can pass the threshold and enter the spiritual world. If we are able to keep our conscious I within this part when it separates, we can enter the domain of the first logi. This will be further explained later. In the realm of this book, we have to understand the concept of awakening the I in different parts of the physical material body, and also in the spiritual compartments of our spiritual makeup. This will be explained and described on the following pages. When we awaken our consciousness within a defined and restricted area of the physical body, as well as the other bodies that we will discuss later, then when we dislocate or translocate this part, we will find that the different parts of the body contain different gateways or portals to the spiritual world. The etheric body. This gives life to the physical body. This etheric body is a manifold and complex structure of flowing and streaming currents of living energy, which set out in relation to the formative forces in the plant world, as well as the totality of these forces in the cosmos. This body can be used as a gateway into the etheric realm of reality, and it contains spiritual sense organs. These organs are developed either directly or as a template influence from the astral body. As explained under the physical material body, we also have to awaken our consciousness within a defined and restricted area of the etheric body, then dislocate or translocate this part, and then use this translocated part as a portal or gateway to the etheric world. Through this portal we can then observe or also partake in the etheric world, as long as we keep our conscious eye awake within the translocated part of the etheric body. We will thus find that different parts of the etheric body contain different gateways or portals to the spiritual world. If we also are able to keep our conscious eye within the separating part of the etheric body, we can enter the domain of the second logos. This etheric body relates also to the intellectual soul and the thinking. The etheric world is a world that contains the life force of the entire cosmos, the force that makes energy appear in the void, what the scientists call the energy of the vacuum, and gives life to all. This etheric world encompasses all that is alive, and it fills us with life force. In trees, this life force can be observed and seen by the clairvoyant eye as dark, snake-like, flowing streams of energy between the trees. That is how I see it. If we are able to keep our conscious eye within the etheric parts that we separate, we enter the domain of the second logos. The etheric world is a force coming from the whole cosmos. The astral body. This is the complex system of forces that relate to our feelings. This body sets us in relation or connects us to the astral world, the animal world, and the cosmic counterparts of these forces. It contains the group souls of animals and is in certain ways the key to understand animal diseases. The astral body forms and influences the etheric body, and also contains the first beginnings of the sentient soul and our feelings. If we also are able to keep our conscious eye within the astral body, when we separate parts of it, we enter the domain of the third logi. The void. When an elemental spirit, a demon, or any other benign or malignant spirit enters, influences or actually takes possession of you, there must be an empty room to occupy, some weakness or a void into where it is possible to dwell. This weakness may be in the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, or the eye itself. The soul fragments, and the soul forces of the astral body. These are important to understand fully because it is in this realm we can begin our journey into the spiritual world by dividing or translocating astral fragments, parts, or faculties. When the conscious eye works upon the different areas of the body, the astral body, the etheric body, or the physical body, the parts that are made conscious are called the soul. Thus the soul consists of 3 parts. The sentient soul, developed from the astral body, related to the third logos, the Holy Spirit. The intellectual soul, developed from the etheric body, related to the second logos, the Son, the Christ. The consciousness soul, developed from the physical body, also related to the first logos, the Father or the Mother. These 3 soul parts are intertwined in the material world, as the astral, etheric and physical bodies are intertwined, and as such also keep or imprison us in this material world. If we can free and translocate the different parts of the soul from this entwinement, we can use these fragments to step over the threshold, to travel or rest in the spiritual world. The important thing here is to stay with the conscious eye within these fragments or forces of the soul, otherwise alien influences may enter, and that is not good. Developed in these soul forces are thinking, related to the intellectual soul; feeling, related to the sentient soul; willing, related to the consciousness soul. The eye. I have already explained the eye above, but I will repeat the definition again briefly. The eye is the very function in our spiritual self where we feel ourselves as ourselves. the only one we can say I to, the one I experience as myself. It can enter all realms of the spiritual, the etheric, the astral, and even the physical. The I is the divine spark of fire inside ourselves, and is both dependent and independent of the body, as during sleep it travels outside our body. According to Rudolf Steiner and Edgar Cayce, after death the I travels through the whole of the planetary realm, through the spheres of the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and then staying a long time in the Sun sphere. Then it travels again through Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and reaches the 12th planet sphere of our solar system, from where it again descends to meet a new incarnation. With this I, we can consciously travel both inside and outside of all our bodies and explore different parts of them. We can visit foreign places in the cosmos, travel in time, become immersed in energetic streams, geopathic earth radiation, and the soul forces called thinking, feeling, and willing. The I is thus of immense power and of unlimited possibilities. I realized this power already as a child, when I experienced that my sore throat healed in a few minutes when I placed my consciousness, or I consciousness, in the throat. The I can thus move and direct the pathological entities or functions in the body through suppression, translocation, or transformation. More of this in Chapter 4. The separation or translocation itself. Any separation and translocation of or within any segment of our being causes a change in our consciousness and in our perception of the world, as long as we are able to maintain our I with or within the separated part. In this way, the conscious translocation will also lead to a gradual transformation, and this is one of the fundamentals in our development as humans and as therapists. This is the foundation of all kinds of supersensible and clairvoyant perception and or attaining of spiritual knowledge, and that this perceptive ability will develop and also be carried over to our next life. When we fall asleep, the astral body, together with the I, separates from the physical and etheric bodies, and our consciousness totally changes. In this sleep state, we enter the spiritual world, but if we are unable to maintain an I consciousness, we fall into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous transformation of our spiritual makeup. This is sometimes called lucid dreaming. When we die, we separate the etheric body from the physical body and we enter the spiritual world. If we are able to maintain consciousness within our etheric and or astral body, we are able to perceive our surroundings in the spiritual world. If not, we fall into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. When, later in the death process, we separate the astral body from the etheric body, we again reach a higher level of the spiritual world and our perception widens. If we are able to maintain our I consciousness in the astral part, we will be able to perceive, act, or think in the spiritual world. If not, we fall into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. When we are in the next step of the death process, we separate the I from the astral body, and again we reach a higher level of the spiritual world and our perception widens further. If we are able to maintain our I consciousness, we will be able to perceive, act, or think in the spiritual world. If not, we fall again into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. When we separate one of the parts of the soul, the sentient, the intellectual, or the consciousness soul from the others, we change our spiritual perception in a way that we can now experience the spiritual world. If we are able to maintain our I consciousness in the separated part, we will be able to perceive, act, or think in the spiritual world relating to the separated part. If not, we fall again into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. When we separate the different parts of the soul faculties as thinking, feeling and willing from the others, we change our spiritual perception in a way that enables us to experience the spiritual world. If we're able to maintain our I consciousness in the separated part, we will be able to perceive, act or think in the spiritual world relating to the separated part. If not, we fall again into oblivion. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. When we change the physiological processes, nervous, circulatory, or any activity in the different parts of the body, we change our spiritual perception in a way that we can experience the spiritual world. If we are able to maintain our I consciousness in the altered function, we will be able to perceive, act or think in the spiritual world relating to the separated or changed part. If not, we fall again into oblivion. An example of this is when one of our legs becomes dead as we sit in a lotus position, yet we are still able to maintain a consciousness in the sleeping leg. We can, through this leg, make observations in the spiritual world. If we can experience this consciously out of our own forces, this will be an eternal gift and a continuous development of our spiritual makeup. The easiest parts to separate from each other are the soul fragments or the soul faculties. Soul fragments: sentient soul, intellectual soul, consciousness soul. Soul faculties: feeling, thinking, willing. These parts are interwoven in the material world as the astral, etheric and physical bodies are intertwined, and as much also imprison us in this material world. If we can free the different parts of the soul from this entwinement, we can use these fragments to step over the threshold, to travel and to be in the spiritual world. The important thing here is to stay with the conscious I within these fragments or forces of the soul, otherwise alien influences may enter, as in some drug use, and that is not good, not at all. So in and through the physical, etheric and astral bodies, the conscious I is working and creating what we may call the soul, this soul being conscious by means of our conscious thinking in the etheric body, our half-conscious feeling in the astral body, and our almost unconscious willing in the physical body. When these three abilities, forces, are interwoven, time is created and can be experienced as a fourth function of space, as a fourth dimension, which can also be experienced as speed. From my experience, the soul thus contains four main functions, and within each function there are multiple sub-functions. These four functions are thinking, feeling, willing and time. Through them and their sub-functions we may perceive the spiritual world, create portals into the spiritual world, travel into this world or become active with our consciousness, our I function in this world through the awakened spiritual sense organs. To be able to operate these parts of the soul, we have to consciously, out of our own forces, separate or translocate a function from the whole, from the rest of the body. This separation or translocation of soul fragments needs a deep and thorough explanation. The general technique of passing the threshold is by achieving this division. We are held as prisoners in the material world because our body and soul are held together by strong forces, almost like atoms in a molecule. These bonds bind us to the illusion that the physical material world is the only true reality, governed by space and time. It seems to me that anything can be divided, and therefore this opens innumerable portals and ways that lead over the threshold and into the spiritual world. However, it must be said and emphasized now, to be able to divide the deeply connected thinking, feeling, time and willing, we have to know what these really are. We must train ourselves to know the reality of our thinking, our feeling, time itself, and of our willing. O man, know thyself, so resounds the cosmic word. You hear it strong in soul, you feel it vast in spirit. Who speaks so vastly cosmic? Who speaks so deeply heartfelt? Does it work through distant radiant space into your sense of being? Does it ring through waves of time into your life's evolving stream? Is it you yourself who in feeling space and experience time create the word, feeling foreign in space's psychic vacancy, because you lose the force of thought in time's destructive flow? That was by Rudolf Steiner. Such a separation occurred automatically with me from the earliest time I can remember, but I did not become conscious of it before I was 5 or 6 years old. In the beginning I tried to stop this separation, as it frightened me to lose reality. Then I started to enjoy the separation, as it was a means to experience something different and exciting. Although at that time I did not believe in any objective spiritual world, I thought it was only inside my brain as a subjective experience. At the age of 21, I realized that this spiritual world was objective and started to take a deeper interest in the dividing, to analyze the method and discover how this division came about. I must emphasize that this method of dividing parts of the spiritual makeup, be it between the etheric and the astral, be it between the thinking, feeling or willing to enter the spiritual world, is not the usually described method by Rudolf Steiner. The usually described method involves a long training in strengthening the thinking, feeling and willing, and then meeting of the guardian of the threshold. This way is not what I've practiced through many years. I've practiced the dividing method as described here. To understand the translocation used in spiritual initiation or development of clairvoyance, it is important to understand the presence and functions of both the guardian of the threshold and the doppelganger. The guardian of the threshold and the doppelganger, crossing the threshold. As the understanding of the doppelganger as well as the guardian of the threshold is essential to the understanding of translocation, threshold passing, and a later possible transformation, I will on the following pages give a discussion of these two entities or forces. Around the turn of the century 1899 to 1900, both the doppelganger motif and the guardian of the threshold were relatively well known. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky described in her books and writings the forces and functions of the doppelganger. Oscar Wilde published his book, The Picture of Dorian Gray, in 1890. The picture was his doppelganger, a book that aroused great interest and controversy in England. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote a book titled The Doppelganger in 1846. In the early 20th century, the initiate, the world master, Peter Dunov, was teaching in Bulgaria. He didn't talk much about the adverse powers. Nevertheless, he once said that at the threshold we will see the terrifying mirror in which we see our doppelganger. In Carlos Castaneda's books, the doppelganger is a very important and dominant fellow in the shamanic tradition. In the United States, the doppelganger forces are much stronger than in Europe, according to Rudolf Steiner. See Geographic Medicine. The doppelganger is closely related and bound to the guardian of the threshold, for the only way of seeing the doppelganger is in the mirror of the guardian, either on or beyond the threshold or in this physical reality to where it might be transposed. If one wishes to find definite descriptions of the doppelganger in Steiner's writing, these can be found in his books How to Attain Knowledge of the Spiritual Worlds, Spiritual Science and Outline, A Path to Self-Knowledge and the Threshold of the Spiritual World. Also, the 19 class lessons Steiner gave in 1924 are important to read. What I found out from reading these books was that there is great confusion and disagreement regarding what and who the guardian of the threshold is, as well as the differences and similarities between this guardian and the doppelganger, as well as other entities that the guardian reveals to us. In his book on the guardian of the threshold, Hans Stauffer notes the following, quote, "When we study Steiner's overall work, we can become quite desperate when we try to compare the different descriptions Steiner has given of the guardian on the threshold. So big are the differences. In his early writings, the guardian is described as a horrible being. Later, in the mystery dramas, as a serious being. End quote. In the first-class lesson, 1924, Steiner describes the guardian of the threshold in the following way. And from out the darkness you appear, the human being is addressed, your likeness manifest in you, yet also a parable of you, earnest spirit words in cosmic ether, heard by your heart, giving strength to you, the spirit messenger, who alone can light for you the way. Before him the fields of sense widen, behind him yawn the abyss depths, and before his dark spirit fields, hard by the yawning abyss of being, resounds his potent creative words. Behold, I am the only gate to knowledge. We then have to remember that we can pass this gate only if we know ourselves. O man, know thyself. From the distant beings in space who experience existence in light, from the stages of the course of time which find expression in creating, from the depths of heartfelt feeling, wherein the self, the world, is fathomed, they resound in the speech of the soul, they gleam in the spirit thoughts from divine curative powers, in the cosmic formative forces, the undulating, existential words, O man, know thyself. Here in 1924, the guardian of the threshold is described and recognized as a teaching master. We now see and understand that the guardian of the threshold can be experienced either as a threatening creature, showing you your own threatening sides, an ugly creature, showing you your own ugly sides, a serious creature, showing you your own thirst for spirituality. The guardian of the threshold can also be experienced as pointing towards other entities created by yourself, as for example, the free animals of the threshold. Yes, you must beware of the abyss, otherwise its beasts will devour you if you pass by me in haste. Your cosmic age has placed them there in you as enemies of knowledge. About your distorted willing. Behold the first beast, the crooked back, the bony head, the scrawny body, his skin is all a dullish blue. Your fear of creative spiritual being begat the monster in your will. Knowledge, bravery alone will overcome it. About your distorted feeling. Behold the second beast, it bares its teeth in a warped face, scornfully it lies. Yellow with grey spots is its body. Your hate of spiritual revelation begat this weakling in your feeling. Your flame for knowledge must subdue him. About your distorted thinking. Behold the third beast with cloven muzzle, its eyes glassy, posture slouching, dirty red its form appears to you. Your doubts in the power of spiritual lights begat this ghost within your thinking. Your creative knowledge must make it yield. Only when you've defeated the three will wings sprout upon your soul to fly the abyss over, which separates you from the knowledge fields to which your heart desires to consecrate itself in healing. The guardian of the threshold can also point towards our own doppelgangers, the image of our mistakes, actions or deeds. Our own luciferic doppelganger showing us our wrong deeds related to the astral body. Our own Aramanic doppelganger showing us our wrong deeds related to the etheric body. If we are able to transform the free animals, remake or remodel our doppelgangers, and strengthen and perfect our thinking, feeling and willing, we can choose between 3 doors in entering the spiritual world. There are, as such, 3 main doors. The door of death, thinking, meeting the third animal. The door of the elements, willing, meeting the first animal. The door of the sun, feeling, meeting the second animal. Steiner in a later lecture described them also as the gate of the head clairvoyance, the gate of the abdomen, abdominal clairvoyance, the gate of the heart clairvoyance. From this we can see that the guardian of the threshold reflects our higher self, our higher I consciousness. This guardian of the threshold will appear, change and transform according to our I consciousness throughout our lives and through time, and also as the whole of mankind is changing over the centuries, especially now that we all have unknowingly passed the threshold. According to Rudolf Steiner, the etheric body, relating to both the heart since 1840 and the head since 1899, has started to loosen and as such allows a growing clairvoyance to gradually develop in all of mankind. With this change, the mirroring and what is mirrored will change as well. Something I have questioned is if this changing mirror image has gained its own developing life, has been created as a community of several elementary beings. To this I have to answer yes. The guardian of the threshold has a self-sustaining life and has become a being, an entity. To understand this, it is important to remember that all our actions, thoughts and feelings create elementary beings, so that the sum of these beings will create one compound or several individual beings that are connected with us and who share our destiny. In addition, we have a number of beings that are not created by us, but who are nevertheless associated with both ourselves and our destiny, such as the Aramanic doppelganger, and eventually in the future the Vulcan beings, not to mention our angels who will be a part of us. The meeting with the guardian of the threshold can and will be experienced quite differently from one person to the other, depending on personality, abilities and stage of development. Passing the threshold without meeting the guardian. Personally, I have always used a method or technique that allows an immediate entrance to the spiritual world without meeting the guardian. This I've kept to myself for many years, as it is somewhat differed from Steiner's descriptions, and that is not comme il faut in anthroposophical circles. I started to look for a description of my personal experiences in Steiner's writings, and at the end I found more than I could ever have hoped for. In a lecture given on the 24th of March 1910, GA 119, Rudolf Steiner describes a method how to pass the guardian of the threshold without actually meeting it, and thereby avoiding confronting the reflection and the awareness of one's own weaknesses. The method is to maintain, at the moment of awakening or falling asleep, or to consciously introduce throughout the day, a partial separation between the etheric and the astral bodies. I have described this method in detail in several of my books, including Demons and Healing and Experiences from the Threshold. I have always understood that there are three pathways to spiritual development offered within anthroposophy. 1. The Christian path focused on working with the Gospel of St. John. 2. The Rosicrucian path described in Steiner's basic book, How to Know Higher Worlds. 3. The thinking path, the most safe and modern path, based on working with the content and form of Steiner's book, The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity, variously translated as The Philosophy of Freedom and Thinking as an Intuitive Path. It has never been quite clear to me what exactly this latter path involves and how ideally it proceeds, how it differs from the work one can do with other philosophical texts, and what specific exercises it might entail. One acquires from The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity an understanding of how we create reality by linking percept and concept, how this activity is the source of our freedom, the development of sense-free thinking, pure thinking and will, and how all this can help guide us in living a moral life of ethical individualism. However, the philosophy of spiritual activity never seems to spell out directly a specific path of spiritual development. I will now describe this fourth path, this shortcut without having to meet the guardian of the threshold immediately, this method of strolling into the spiritual world, which I've used for as long as I can remember. I call this method the method of translocation. The method of translocation. This shortcut, described by Steiner in 1910, is elaborated in several places, including a lecture on Prometheus, also referred to in the temple legend, as well as in Christianity as a mystical fact. If one then passes the guardian of the threshold in this way, one must go the way that Hercules, Prometheus, and Chiron went. When we have created a distinction, separation or translocation between the astral and the etheric, or even between the free soul activities, we can then consciously experience the etheric world. This is something I have been puzzled by for many years, namely that I always first enter the etheric world and not the astral world that many others describe. Rudolf Steiner points to this in Pastoral Medicine. Quote, "Let us consider first what the situation is when the astral body and ego approach the etheric body. In clairvoyance one can bring this condition about fairly easily by strengthening thinking, strengthening it by very thorough energetic meditation. Then it is easy to come to this condition. It is the beginning of initiation. One slips down into the etheric body, but is not yet able to take hold of the physical body. One remains in the etheric body. In this condition it is possible to think very, very well. One sees nothing, hears nothing, but one can think very well. Thinking is not in the least extinguished, but seeing, hearing, and the other sense activities are suppressed. At first, thinking remains the same, except that one can think more than previously. One can think such thoughts as we are expressing here, for instance, thought about the macrocosm. Thinking becomes wider. One knows clearly, now I am in the etheric world. Thus, when one is in the etheric body, one is truly in the world ether. One has the clear experience of this. I am in the spiritual world out of which the sense world comes. But one is not able to differentiate between spiritual world and sense world. One is beyond a differentiated sense world. The sun no longer shines, the stars no longer shine. There is no moonlight. There is no longer a clear distinction between the kingdoms of nature on the earth. A person only has this faculty when down in the physical body, in normal life, or in a higher stage of initiation. But in exchange for the blurring of the contours of the sense world, there is a general spirituality, the weaving life of the spirit. If one goes further, if one takes conscious hold of the physical body and begins to live in the organs, the perceptions that had become dim or had vanished begin to emerge again, with the exception of earthly four, as spirit entities. Where earlier in ordinary consciousness one had seen the sun and then had become dark, foggy, but had still been within the general weaving spirituality, now there appear beings of the second hierarchy. Now one can differentiate in the spiritual world. Moon and stars appear again, but in their spiritual aspect. They are now spiritual colonies. They can be called that, or something similar. Now one understands how in ordinary everyday consciousness humankind sees the sun, for instance, in its physical form, and the same with other things. But when someone has entered consciously into a physical body and has actually taken hold of it in its spiritual dimension, the sun is seen as a spiritual being, and the same with the whole world. Now we know that with each sun ray shining down upon us during the day, spirit is also entering us. Through every sense experience, spirit is entering us. We have therefore to regard the higher, finer breathing as a breathing. This is continuously impregnated by spirit. And we perceive that the sun is living in every sense perception that streams into us. It is indeed the spirit of the sun, or the spirits of the sun. The sun is present in every sense perception. In our finer breathing, the sun force, the sun life, is streaming straight into us. So you see the relation humanity has to the sun. When a ray of light streams into your eye, the sun spirit is streaming in with that ray of light. The spirit of the sun is the substance of the finer breathing. With our sense perceptions, we breathe in the manifold ingredients of the spiritual sun. You have there an important view of the human being from one direction. As one unfolds in an etheric body, one develops in the etheric body thinking, the thought of the universe. These thoughts of the universe in which one finds oneself when living consciously in an etheric body are at first devoid of warmth or cold, devoid of tone. They are a kind of vague feeling in which one's feeling of self merges with one's feeling of the macrocosm. But if now one takes hold of the physical body, one enters into the spirit of the sense perceptions, and the thoughts are infused from various sides through the eyes. The sun essence, thought, that is breathed in is infused with colour. Through the ear, thought is tinted with tone. Through the organ of warmth, thought is tinted with warmth or cold. There you have the cosmic relation of thought to sense perception. Thought must be understood as preceding the sense experience. Then the sense experience comes through infusion, tinted by the sun." End quote. In going this direct way, one must then perform 12 important works in the physical world, or at the intersection of the physical and the etheric world, so that through the suffering experienced in these 12 tasks or works, one comes to the knowledge of the zodiac. These works are connected to all the 12 zodiacal realities, also relating to all the 12 sensory organs and also the 12 bodily processes. One will then learn to know the macrocosm and microcosm. However, this alone is not enough. We must also sacrifice our inner centaur, Chiron, our animalistic nature. Through entering the spiritual worlds by means of the described separation technique, and by separating or translocating one of our spiritual constituents, the meeting with the guardian of the threshold and the resulting reflections and awareness revealed through our weaknesses will be shifted to the material world. The 12 labours of Hercules are related to the 12 streams related to the forces streaming in from the universe, the cosmic etheric forces. These forces materialize in the 12 organs that make us able to express ourselves in the material world. In a fit of madness induced by Hera, Heracles killed his children and Megaera. After his madness had been cured with hellebore by Antikyros, the founder of Antikyra, he realized what he had done and fled to the oracle of Delphi. Unbeknownst to him, the oracle was guided by Hera. He was directed to serve King Eurystheus for 10 years and perform any task Eurystheus required of him. Eurystheus decided to give Heracles 10 labours, but after completing them, Heracles was cheated by Eurystheus, who then added 2 more, resulting in the 12 labours of Heracles. The labours of Hercules are not recounted in any single place, but must be reassembled from many sources. Ruck and Staples assert that there is no one way to interpret the labours, but that 6 were located in the Peloponnese, culminating with the rededication of Olympia. 6 others took the hero farther afield, to places that were, per Ruck, quote, all previously strongholds of Hera or the goddess, and were entrances to the netherworld. End quote. In each case the pattern was the same. Hercules was sent to kill or subdue or to fetch back for Eurystheus as Hera's representative a magical animal or plant. A famous depiction of the labours in Greek sculpture is found on the metopes of the temple of Zeus at Olympia, which dates to the 450s BC. In his labours, Hercules was sometimes accompanied by a male companion, an Eromenes, according to Lysimenius and others such as Lolas, his nephew. Although he was supposed to perform only 10 labours, this assistance led to 2 labours being disqualified. Eurystheus refused to recognise slaying the Hydra because Lolas helped him, and the cleansing of the Augean stables, because Heracles was paid for his services and because the rivers did the work. Several of the labours involved the offspring, by various accounts, of Typhon and his mate Echidna, all overcome by Hercules, and this is from Wikipedia. A traditional order of the labours, found in the Bibliotheca, is 1. Slay the Nemean lion, deed of the heart or Leo. 2. Slay the 9-headed Lernaean hydra, deed of the stomach or Cancer. 3. Capture the Cernaean hind, deed of the blood circulation, pericardium or Scorpio. 4. Capture the Eimanthian boar, deed of the lungs or Libra. 5. Clean the Augean stables in a single day, deed of the small intestines or Aquarius. 6. Slay the Stymphalian birds, deed of the gallbladder or Sagittarius. 7. Capture the Cretan bull, deed of the Hormonian system or Taurus. 8. Steal the mares of Diomedes, deed of the large intestine or Aries. 9. Obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, deed of the kidneys or Virgo. 10. Obtain the cattle of the monster Chiron, deed of urinary bladder or Pisces. 11. Steal the apples of the Hesperides, deed of the liver or Gemini. 12. Capture and bring back Cerberus, deed of the spleen or Capricorn. Another connection between the labours of Hercules and the zodiacal constellations, other than the traditional one, can be found in the book Die Steinschrift im Heracles Mythos, written by Olga von Ungen. 1. Leo, double fight with the lion. 2. Cancer, fight with the snake of Lerna. 3. Gemini, Stymphalian birds. 4. Taurus, ball of Poseidon. 5. Aries, Hershka of Artemis. 6. Pisces, Amazon queen, meeting with the big fish. 7. Aquarius, fight with the boar of Eirmanthea. 8. Capricorn, horse of Diomedes. 9. Sagittarius, cattle of Apollon. 10. Scorpio, apples of the Hesperides. 11. Libra, Cerberus. 12. Virgo, Augean stables. In this way we will learn to know both microcosm and macrocosm, but this is not enough. We must also develop the skills to kill our inner centaur, Chiron, which is our dual animal nature. The separation or translocation technique is also described by Steiner in a lecture held in Finland in 1912, and here he says, quote, "Suppose a human soul gazes in this way at nothing but the blue of the sky. A certain moment then comes, a moment in which the blue sky ceases to be blue, in which we no longer see anything which can in human language be called blue. If at that moment when the blue to us ceases to be blue, we turn our attention to our own soul, we shall notice quite a special mood in it. The blue disappears and, as it were, an infinity arises before us, and in this infinity a quite definite mood in our soul, a quite definite feeling, a quite definite perception pours itself into the emptiness which arises where the blue had been before. If we would give a name to this soul perception, to that which would soar out there into infinite distances, there is only one word for it. It is a devout feeling in our soul, a feeling of pious devotion to infinity. All the religious feelings in the evolution of humanity have fundamentally a nuance which contains within it what I have here called a pious devotion. The impression of the blue vault of the heavens which stretches above us has called up a religious feeling and moral perception. When within our souls the blue has disappeared, a moral perception of the external world springs to life. Let us now reflect upon another feeling by means of which we can in another way attune ourselves in moral harmony with external nature. When the trees are bursting into leaf and the meadows are filled with green, let us fix our gaze upon the green which in the most varied manner covers the earth or meets us in the trees. And again, we will do this in such a way as to forget all the external impressions which can affect our souls, and simply devote ourselves to that which in external nature meets us as green. If once more we are so circumstanced that we can yield ourselves to that which springs forth as the reality of green, we can carry this so far that the green disappears for us, in the same way as previously the blue as blue disappeared. Here again we cannot say a colour is spread out before our sight, but, and I remark expressly that I am telling you of things that everyone can experience for himself if he fulfills the requisite conditions. The soul has instead a peculiar feeling which can be thus expressed. I now understand what I experience when I think creatively, when a thought springs up in me, when an idea strikes me. I understand this now for the first time. I can only learn this from the bursting forth of the green all around me. I begin to understand the inmost parts of my soul through external nature, when the outer natural impression has disappeared, and in its place a moral impression is left. The green of the plant tells me how I ought to feel within myself, when my soul is blessed with the power to think thoughts, to cherish ideas. Here again an external impression of nature is transmuted into a moral feeling. Or again we may look at a wide stretch of white snow, in the same way as in the description just given of the blue of the sky and the green of earth's robe of vegetation. So this too can set free within us a moral feeling for all that we call the phenomenon of matter in the world. And if, in contemplation of the white snow mantle, we can forget everything else and experience the whiteness, and then allow it to disappear, we obtain an understanding of that which fills the earth as substance, as matter. We then feel matter living and weaving in the world, and just as one can transform all external sight impressions into moral perceptions, so too can one transform impressions of sound into moral perceptions. Suppose we listen to a tone and then to its octave, and so attune our souls to this dual sound of a tonic note and its octave that we forget all the rest, eliminate all the rest, and completely yield ourselves to these tones. It comes about at last that, instead of hearing these dual tones, our attention is directed from these, and we no longer hear them. Then again we find that in our soul a moral feeling is set free. We begin then to have a spiritual understanding of what we experience, when a wish lives within us that tries to lead us to something, and then our reason influences our wish. The concord of wish and reason, of thought and desire, as they live in the human soul, is perceived in the tone and its octave. End quote from GA 136. What Steiner here describes is very close to the technique I use, and which I describe here in this book as a fourth way, the strolling over the threshold. If we then practice this technique of separating different parts of our spiritual makeup, the etheric world will first reveal itself for us as further described by Steiner. Quote, "In like manner, we might let the most varied sense perceptions work upon us. We would in this way let all that we perceive in nature through our senses disappear, as it were, so that this sense vow is removed. Then moral perceptions of sympathy and antipathy will arise everywhere. If we accustom ourselves to this way to eliminate all that we see with our eyes or hear with our ears, or that our hands grasp, or that our understanding, which is connected with the brain, comprehends, if we eliminate all that, and accustom ourselves, nevertheless, to stand before the world, then there works within us something deeper than the power of vision of our eyes, or the power of hearing with our ears, or the intellectual power of our brain thinking. We then confront a deeper being of the external world. Then the immensity of infinity so works upon us that we become imbued with a religious mood. Then does the green mantle of plants so work upon us that we feel and perceive in our inner being something spiritually bursting forth into bloom. Then does the white robe of snow so work upon us that by it we gain an understanding of what matter, of what substance is in the world. We grasp the world through something deeper within us than we had hitherto brought into play. And therefore, in this way, we come into touch with something deeper in the world itself. Then, as it were, the external veil of nature is drawn aside, and we enter a world which lies behind this external veil. Just as when we look behind the physical body of man, we come to the etheric or life body. So in this way, we come into a region in which, gradually, manifold beings disclose themselves. Those beings which live and work behind the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. The etheric world gradually appears before us, differentiated in its details." End quote. By entering the spiritual world through the technique described, that is to separate the etheric from the astral body, we avoid meeting the guardian of the threshold and the reflection of our weak sides. This spiritual function on meeting will then be transposed into the physical world. Here I will recount a personal experience. Within a few months, 3 women, all of whom were medical doctors, stood up in front of me, looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Why did you kill me that time?" The first woman was 49 years old and accused me of killing her 4,000 years ago in China. The other woman was 39 and accused me of killing her 20,000 years ago in Atlantis. The third woman was 29 years old and accused me of killing her 40,000 years ago, also in Atlantis. This confrontation brought me into my karma and old abuse of magic powers, murders, torture and black magic for the sake of my own interest. This karmic journey, which led me several times to Ireland, was initiated by these 3 women and led me to face my iniquities eye to eye. These 3 women were in this case my doppelganger, animals, guardian of the threshold, all in one, and I had to be the Hercules. This work is described in detail in my book The Forgotten Mysteries of Atlantis. We also find a further description by Rudolf Steiner in a lecture that he held in Christiania, Oslo in 1912. Quote, "When the occultist succeeds in experiencing in this way something like an after-image in respect of the human form, when, that is to say, having first comprehended this human form as he finds it in the physical world, he allows it then to echo on in him in the way that an after-image echoes on when he is able to have this experience, and afterwards to wait until the image of the human form is past and gone. He will obtain a picture of the human form which is no longer an image of the physical form, but is experienced in the ether body. You see, for the pupil in occultism, it is a question of experiencing himself in the ether body. And when the pupil has come to the point of experiencing himself in this way in the ether body, then this experience is indeed a profound one. It falls at once into 2 distinct experiences. It does not remain whole and single. And these 2 experiences have to be expressed by 2 words. We have to say that the pupil experiences first death and second Lucifer." End quote. Relating to the method of separation, I would also like to refer to the last 2 lectures Rudolf Steiner held in Torquay, England, describing an initiation path that could be found at the intersection between sleep and awakening, when the etheric and the astral are on the way to divorce or on the way to reunification, and these can be found in the lectures GA 243. In a lecture held in 1924, Rudolf Steiner says the following, quote, "We know, therefore, that by inner effort man brings the night consciousness into the day consciousness. When this happens in full consciousness, just as other activities are performed consciously during the day, when this vigilant man is able to invoke the night activities of the moon into the waking experiences of the daytime, then he is on the true path. If he allows anything to enter into him when he is not fully conscious, so that out of their own inner momentum the night experiences arise in the day consciousness, then he finds himself on the false path that ultimately leads to mediumism." End quote. In these lectures, Rudolf Steiner describes how the forces of the sun and the moon will work in us when we ourselves work with the gap between the etheric and the astral body upon waking up or going to sleep. Steiner describes how the sun forces will work from the inside during the night and from the outside during the day, and that the moon forces will work from the inside during the day and from the outside during the night. This is very well known by those who travel in the etheric, that the physical and the etheric worlds are completely opposite, mirror reversed or upside down. As I related earlier, I have worked with this door since I was 3 years of age, and had the following experience around 7 years of age, which I wrote down as a poem when I was about 12 years old. The Angel. The doors are closed. In one of the doors there is a little window, and the handle is low enough to be reached for the one that is small. The door is open and the new spring air flows in. Not far away is the cherry tree filled with its smell, and white flowers as the full white moon. I am new washed, and it is Saturday. Close to the cherry tree trunk a being is standing in the moonlight, and even if it is day and all the others asleep in their afternoon nap, the entity is glowing in the dark. That was by Are Thoresen in 1964. So, in my experiences and observations, there are several areas where the direct way differs from the normal way in which the meeting with the guardian is included. 1. The guardian of the threshold is not met at the threshold, but in the physical realm and in the border area between the physical and the etheric, in direct connection with karma. 2. The etheric world is met before the astral world. 3. The demonic realm is first met quite early in the etheric world and not later in the astral world. In my opinion, this makes the observation more objective. 4. In meeting the etheric world first, we also meet the Ahrimanic demon death and the Luciferic temptation. Having a physical, etheric and astral body, different time functions and the described soul properties, we have innumerable instruments and ways for our passing of the thresholds. A gradual transformation of the parts of the spiritual makeup. I must also add that in working with the separated or translocated parts of our spiritual makeup, we also induce a gradual transformation of these parts, as we get to control and know them better in this way, and that knowledge also induce a gradual and lifelong transformation. Something about the 12 sense organs, how they can be opened. Our second tool. In working with the 12 cosmic streams and the 12 physical tasks of initiation, we must also say something about the 12 senses, the 12 sense organs. In connection with the 12 sense organs, I will describe the way we can use these sense openings or power streams to understand the tasks we have to perform after the passing of the threshold. We will also investigate the relationship between sensory organs and the adversarial powers, Lucifer, Ahriman and Asuras, as well as the upper and lower spiritual worlds, illustrated with examples from Genesis chapters 37 to 50. Observations of how electronic devices, electronic music, also acoustic when transmitted through amplifiers, modern way of life and obesity affect the 12 sensory organs, prevent a spiritual vision and influence from the opposing powers. Two of the most important concepts in anthroposophical literature are Christ's second coming in the etheric and humanity's collective passage of the threshold of the spiritual world. In order for us to be able to observe this, it is of great importance that we allow the spiritual part of our sensory organs to become conscious, to be opened. Several have related this phenomenon to the activation of the chakras, especially to the heart chakra. In this context, I will focus on the changes we can expect to observe in our 12 sensory organs. The reason why this is so important is that in our time, Christ will reveal himself in the etheric, and if we do not have organs to observe this, this event will pass unnoticed, which will be of catastrophic consequences for mankind. Therefore, the opposing powers will do their utmost to prevent us from being able to observe this incident. Early in the year 1910, Rudolf Steiner spoke for the first time about the mystery of the true nature of Christ's second coming here in the world. During this year, he gave a series of lectures on this topic, and he continued this in the following years. The importance of this topic cannot be exaggerated. The study of the second coming of Christ, the collective threshold of mankind, and the opening of our spiritual sensory organs are fundamental to our entire understanding and meaning of the anthroposophical movement. Christ's first coming in the flesh occurred in an era when human sensory organs could only observe the material reality, at the deepest point of the descent to Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. But today our open spiritual organs will more and more be able to find Christ in the etheric. First he will be seen by a few, but over the next 3,000 years more and more will see him. In a lecture in Basel on October 1st, 1911, Series GA130, Steiner talked about that in the future Christ could be felt or heard by all that gathered to receive him. Note that this relates to the two sensory organs of feeling of life and hearing, as we will later see were the two only senses that remained in Israel and were not lost, were scattered throughout the world. In his lecture cycle on the Matthew Gospel, Steiner described the extensive preparations made for Christ to be able to incarnate in the physical body of Jesus of Nazareth, especially with relation to Yeshua ben Pandera. In 1911, Steiner gave 2 lectures on Yeshua ben Pandera, GA130, where Steiner gave an explicit message to mankind about the importance of preparing the opportunity for Christ's second coming in the etheric, and that it was precisely for this reason that anthroposophy existed today. He said, quote, "All working with anthroposophy and spiritual science must participate in the endeavour to open up the second coming of Christ in the etheric." End quote. The 12 sensory organs. In order to make it easier for the reader to get an overview of these partially complicated conditions, I will start by describing schematically the 12 sensory organs as Rudolf Steiner describes them. Rudolf Steiner has carefully described these 12 senses, see GA169. He describes them as openings or portals to both the physical, ethereal and astral aspects of humans and the cosmos. Each sense is associated with its own angel from the first hierarchy expressed in each of the 12 animal signs of the zodiac. In this way the 12 senses can be seen as a 12-fold whole. The 12 senses as they are in the spiritual realm, starting with the level of sense, zodiacal, physical part for the sense. 1. Physical sense, imagination, with the sense of touch, in the zodiac sign of Cancer, with the physical part for the sense of skin. 2. Physical sense, imagination, with the sense of life, in the zodiac of the Lion, with the physical part for the sense of the mucous membranes. 3. Physical sense, imagination, sense of movement in the sign of Virgo, with the physical part for the sense muscles. 4. Physical sense, imagination, with the sense of orientation, balance, in the sign of Libra, with the physical sense for the part of the inner ear. 5. Sense of soul, inspiration, with the sense of smelling in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, in the physical sense of nose, remembrance. 6. Sense of soul, inspiration, with the sense of tasting in the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, with the physical part for the sense being the tongue, sweet, sour, bitter. 7. The sense of soul, inspiration, with the sense of sight in the zodiacal sign of Capricorn, with the physical part for the sense of the eye. 8. Sense of soul, inspiration, with the sense of temperature in the sign of the Waterman, Aquarius, with the physical part for the sense of the skin. 9. Spiritual sense. Intuition, in the sense of hearing, in the sign of the fish, Pisces, with the physical part for the sense being the ear. 10. Spiritual sense. Intuition, with the sense of language in the sign of the ram, Aries, with the physical part for the sense of muscles and bone. 11. Spiritual sense. Intuition, with the sense of thinking in the sign of Taurus, with the physical part for the sense of the etheric body. 12. The spiritual sense. Intuition, with the sense of the eye, for the eye of the other. This is in the sign of Gemini, the twins, with the physical sense of the skin. The 12 signs as they are described in the story of Joseph and his 11 brothers. In the Bible, the Old Testament, Genesis chapters 37 to 50, there is a history that occupies a relatively large space and dominates the time referred to. It is the story of Joseph and his brothers. In short, it is as follows. Abraham, who is the first physically conscious man, miraculously receives his son Isaac. Isaac in turn gets his son Isaac, who in turn gets his son Jacob. Jacob gets 12 sons, of whom the second youngest is called Joseph. The story of Joseph is one of the most dramatic stories in the Old Testament. He goes from being expelled from his brother's home in the land of Canaan to being the most powerful man in Egypt. He is both wise and handsome, and this brings him both accident and success. In dreams he had learned that in the future he would rule over his brothers. This he told his brothers, but they took this information badly, perhaps because they were already jealous of Joseph, as they knew Jacob loved Joseph more than his other sons. We will later see that Joseph represented the I sense, the sense of the coming Christ. Keep this in mind as the story unveils. Therefore they decided to kill Joseph. This didn't go well. Joseph was sold to Egypt as a slave. In Egypt, Joseph first came to Potiphar's house, one of Pharaoh's men. After a dispute with Potiphar's wife, where Joseph was wrongly accused of adhering to her, he was imprisoned. But God was with Joseph, so he ended up being Pharaoh's right hand. He became the highest official of the kingdom, the foremost man in Egypt after Pharaoh. This happened because he had a special ability to understand and decipher the spiritual contents and prophetic content of dreams. Joseph explained this in some of Pharaoh's dreams. As a result, Egypt escaped a famine that struck this part of the world. Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to buy grain. They thought he was dead and did not recognize Joseph as the most powerful man of Egypt. After some complications, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he forgave them. After that, all the brothers moved with their father Jacob and the rest of the family to Egypt. So it was because of Joseph that the Israelites came to Egypt. There they lived for many generations, until Moses led them back to the land of Canaan. The story of Joseph is the link between Genesis 1 and 2. In Exodus we follow Moses and the Israelites, or the Hebrews, on their journey back from Egypt to Canaan. The story of Joseph is not mentioned anywhere else in the Bible, but it is nevertheless the whole point of departure for the rest of Bible history. This story of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob with his 12 sons, the awakening of the 12 sense organs, starts with that Abraham leaves Ur in Chaldea to venture into Israel. Abraham is the man Rudolf Steiner describes as follows in a lecture on November the 20th, 1912. Quote, "On the occasion of my last visit here, we heard how, at the end of the first millennium of Kali Yuga, some kind of compensation was given for the loss of the vision of the spiritual worlds. This replacement was made possible by the fact that a particular individual, Abraham, was chosen because the special organization of his physical brain made it possible for him to have consciousness in the spiritual world without the ancient lucid vision. That is why in the spirit of science we call the first millennium of Kali Yuga for Abraham's era. It was the era when man indeed lost the direct vision into the spiritual world, but when it unfolded in him a divine consciousness which gradually paved its way more and more into his ego. with the result that he came to think on the divine related to the human ego consciousness. In the first millennium of Kali Yuga, which by its conclusion we can call Abraham's epoch, the divine becomes manifest as a world god. It was not always so. In pre-Christian times, the process of evolution did not require men unconditionally to acquire this understanding of every human soul. Humanity was obliged to pass through the phase of a one-sided attitude. But those who were trained for some kind of leadership in the world were obliged to acquire, either consciously or less consciously, an understanding for every human being without distinction. Even when some individual was to be the leader of a particular people, he would be required to develop a measure of understanding for every human soul. This is indicated magnificently in the Old Testament in the passage describing the meeting between Abraham and Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High. Those who understand this passage know that Abraham, who was destined to become the leader of his people, underwent an initiation at this time, even if not in full consciousness, as is the case in later initiations. Abraham's initiation was connected with realization of the divine element that can flow into all human souls. The passage which tells of the meeting of Abraham with Melchizedek contains a deep secret connected with the evolution of humanity." End quote. In a lecture on March the 6th, 1910, Rudolf Steiner said, and this is from GA 118, "This Abraham epoch was followed by the Moses epoch, when the God Yahweh, the world ego, was no longer revealed in the form of a mysterious guidance of human destinies, as a god of a single people. In the Moses epoch this deity was revealed, as we know, in the burning bush, as the god of the elements. And it was a great advance when, through the teachings of Moses, the world ego as the deity was experienced in such a way that men realized the elements of manifested existence, all that is seen with physical eyes, lightning, thunder, and so on, are emanations, deeds of the world ego, ultimately of the one world ego. We must, however, clearly understand in what way this denoted an advance. Before the Abraham epoch and before Kali Yuga, we find that through the direct vision of the spiritual worlds was made possible, by the remains of the old clairvoyants, to behold the spiritual, as indeed was the case in all these ancient times. We must go infinitely far back to find anything else. Men actually beheld the spiritual during Dvapara Yuga, Trita Yuga, and Krita Yuga, beheld it as a multiplicity of beings. You know that when we rise into the spiritual worlds, we find there the hierarchies of spiritual beings. They, naturally, are under a unified guidance, but this was beyond the grasp of consciousness in those ancient times. To grasp the spiritual beings as a unity was possible only for the initiates. But now the world ego, grasped for the first time by man himself with the physical instrument of the brain, a faculty that had developed in a specially marked way in Abraham, and he conceived the world ego as manifesting in the different kingdoms of nature, in the elements. A further advance was made in the last millennium before the founding of Christianity, in the Solomon epoch. Thus the 3 millennia before the founding of Christianity can be distinguished by calling the first millennium by the name of the individuality who appears and then works on into the second, the Abraham epoch. From the beginning of Kali Yuga until Abraham men are being prepared to recognize the one God behind the manifestations of nature. This possibility begins with Abraham. In the Moses epoch, the one God becomes the ruler of the manifestations of nature and is sought for behind them. All this is then intensified in the Solomon epoch, and we are led through this last epoch to that point in evolution where the same divine being whom the Abraham epoch and the Moses epoch beheld in Yahweh, where the same divine being takes on human form, the form of Jesus." End quote. Abraham had his son Isaac, who begot Jacob. Jacob got the name Israel from God, suggesting that forces from the archangels intervened. This intervention resulted in the birth of 12 sons. These 12 sons have since been related to the 12 animal images, and here I will relate them to the 12 sensory organs as shown in the form below. Level of sense. Sense, zodiac, physical body part related to sons of Jacob. 1. Physical imagination, to the sense of touch, in the zodiac sign of Cancer, physical body part skin, son of Jacob, Benjamin, lost. 2. Physical imagination, to the sense of life, in the zodiac of Leo, in the physical body part of the mucous membranes, related to sons of Jacob, Judah. 3. Physical imagination, to the sense of movement, in the sign of Virgo, with the physical body part muscles, related to the son of Jacob, Naphtali, lost. 4. Physical imagination, to the sense of orientation and balance, in the sign of Libra, related to the body of the inner ear, related to sons of Jacob, Dan, lost. 5. The soul inspiration, related to the sense of smell, to the sign of Scorpio, to the physical body part of nose, memory, related to the son of Jacob, Simeon, lost. 6. The soul inspiration, related to the sense of taste, in the sign of Sagittarius, related to the physical body part of the tongue, related to the sons of Jacob, Gad, lost. 7. Soul inspiration, related to the sense of sight, in the zodiacal sign of Capricorn, to the physical body part of eye, and related to the son of Jacob, Reuben, lost. 8. Soul inspiration, to the sense of temperature, in the sign of Aquarius, to the physical body part skin, related to the son of Jacob, Zebulun, lost. 9. Spiritual intuition, to the sense of hearing, to the sign of Pisces, related to the physical body part of the ear, related to sons of Jacob, Levi. 10. Spiritual intuition, sense of language, zodiac Ram, the physical body part, muscles and bones, related to the son of Jacob, Issachar, lost. 11. Spiritual intuition, to the sense of thinking, to the zodiac sign of Taurus, to the physical body part of the brain, etheric body, related sons of Jacob, Asher, lost. 12. Spiritual intuition, to the sense of the eye sense for the eye of others, to the zodiac sign of Gemini, the physical body part of the skin, related to sons of Jacob, Joseph, Ephraim, lost, and Manasseh, lost. Israel's 12 tribes lived in different areas of Israel. I have travelled a lot around Israel and have experienced that the different areas are very individualized. This has also been observed and described by Emil Bock in his books on Christ's life and the Old Testament, especially in his description of the physiognomy of the Holy Land. Therefore, Christ with his disciples walked in this land in a very special way, and in a very special pattern. It couldn't have been any different. The 12 tribes have divided into 2 parts, the North Kingdom and the South Kingdom. The South Empire was inhabited by the tribes of Judah and Simeon. The 10 remaining inhabited the North Kingdom. Then the Assyrians invaded the North Empire and led 10 of the tribes of Israel into captivity to Assyria, from which the tribes never returned. Later the Babylonians invaded the South Empire and abducted the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, but they returned after some time, and today these 2 tribes are essentially the Jewish people of Israel. Therefore the mystery arose with the lost 10 tribes, which according to tradition have migrated to different parts of Europe and America. Particularly it appears that England and Ireland were of particular interest. Also, the Holy Grail was brought centuries later by Joseph of Arimathea to this area. According to information from Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, groups of people migrated from Israel to the United Kingdom in particular. We can understand that these wanderings or migrations were important on the basis of the realization that the whole Earth is interwoven into a holistic etheric force field, as described by James Lovelock. Rudolf Steiner also describes the Earth as a living organism. He explicitly states, quote, "The Earth is like a living organism that acts upon the beings that wander around it, and as man is organized and differentiated as to how their bodies are distributed over the body, so is the Earth organized and differentiated with regard to the people who inhabit it." End quote. Therefore, it was of great importance that the 10 tribes, these 10 transcendental sensory organs, were spread over the earth, just as the blood of Christ Jesus. 1. Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, United States, British Isles. 2. Judah, Germany, Austria, part of Poland, part of Switzerland and Israel. 3. Benjamin, Iceland, Greenland. 4. Asher, Azerbaijan, Sweden, Russia, Ukraine. 5. Issachar, Finland. 6. Naphtali, Norway. 7. Dan, Denmark, Baltic states. 8. Gad, Italy, part of Switzerland. 9. Reuben, Germany, Holland. 10. Simeon, Spain, Portugal. 11. Zebulon, France, Monte Carlo, Andorra, part of Switzerland. 12. Levi, certainly not modern-day Israel. The sense of life and the hearing sense were thus the senses that were not lost. The Israelis could still hear and life-sense Yahweh, but not see him, but remained in Israel. The rest was spread across to Europe, especially the UK, but also Scandinavia and America. In Kabbalah it is said that when the Messiah returns, these tribes will return to Israel. The transcendental part of the remaining 10 senses will then be recovered and awakened in humanity under Christ's second coming. We now live in the time when all 12 senses will become conscious in the people who are mature to it. And that also means that the transcendent part, the clairvoyant part of these senses will be awakened. According to tradition, these senses will then be brought back to Israel, thus brought to observe Christ. This is called the second coming of Christ. Then all the 12 overseas sensory organs will be brought back to Israel. But as the transcendental aspect of these 12 senses is in the process of opening, and all mankind will then cross the threshold of the spiritual world, only that it is not fully conscious yet, the counter-powers will also be strongly engaged to prevent this, or better nourish these organs with their reality. This is happening today in many ways, and I will mention and elaborate on 3 methods. In electronic communication in media, including film and TV, Ahriman's attack, Lucifer's attack. In electronic music, all music that has gone through an amplifier, Lucifer's attack. In the obesity epidemic we see today over most of the world, which prevents both imagination, inspiration and intuition, probably an attack by Ahriman. I will explain in detail how the opposing powers, especially Ahriman as the present-day primary opponent, advocate manipulating and inspiring the modern evolution of electronic technology in order to leverage control of humanity. In addition, there is the technology and life set that has led to the obesity epidemic we see today. His main issues today are the portals that the following senses offer him: eyes, ears, the skin. The threefold, fourfold and 12-fold human. In Steiner's description of man, he categorizes and divides using several methods. First, he divides us into 4 layers, consisting of our physical, ethereal, astral, and I. However, this concept of a fourfold being can be described as having both 7 and 9 levels. If one also considers our spiritual future with the higher levels called Buddhi, Manas, and Atma. Finally, in its deepest foundation, our higher self, as well as the entire creation, is governed by a primary trinity of the dominant soul forces of thought, feeling, and will. They represent the basic processes after which our total cosmos is organized and developed, and these characterize all aspects of creation. This trinity includes the entire cosmos, the divine angelic hierarchies, as well as the undernature of spiritual beings such as elves, hidden people, and other elemental beings. This last aspect of our universe can be seen with the spiritual eye as an upside-down reality, or perhaps it may be our world upside down. In this way one can imagine that our souls touch their souls, and that their world has our world as their earth, a reversed image of our cosmos. I guess most of us are of the opinion that the explosion we've seen in electronics and communication over the past few decades is ushering in a time of profound development for mankind's best. At the touch of a button, we can find information about almost everything, also within anthroposophy, AnthroWiki. We can buy, sell and examine what we want within minutes. We can get in touch with who we want over the whole world in seconds via social media, which has changed our perception of the written word. The language has now gradually become an effective weapon against all humanity in the constructed system of communication we call Twitter or Instagram. With this as a background, it is also no wonder that the existence of electronic technology has also created an effective, powerful, and effective tool for the adversarial powers of Lucifer and Ahriman. The 12 senses, as they are mirrored, are actualized in sub-nature, first, second, and third elementary world. Level of sub-nature 1. The sense of touch. The electricity magnetism atomic zodiac is in Cancer. The physical body part is the skin. The epoch is Benjamin, lost. Level of sub-nature 1. With the sense of life, with the electricity in the sign of Leo, with the physical body part of mucous membranes in the epoch of Judah. Level of sub-nature 1. With the sense of movement, with the electricity of in Virgo, with the physical body part muscles, with the epoch of Naphtali, lost. The level of sub-nature 1. In the sense of orientation and balance, in the sign of Libra, electricity, in the physical body part of the conchi, the ear, in the epoch of Dan, lost. In the level of sub-nature 2, with the sense of smell, with the magnetism of the Scorpio, in the body part of the nose, memory, in the epoch of Simeon, lost. In the sub-level of 2, with the sense of taste, in the magnetism of Sagittarius, in the body of the part of the tongue, with the epoch of Gad, lost. In the level of sub-nature 2, with the sense of sight, with the magnetism in the sign of Capricorn, in the body part of Eye, with the epoch of Rubin. In the level of sub-nature 2, in the sense of temperature, with magnetism in the sign of Aquarius, in the body part of Skin, in the epoch of Zebulun, lost. In the level of sub-nature 3, in the sense of hearing, in the atomic sign of Pisces, in the body part of Ear, with the epoch of Levi. In the level of sub-nature 3, in the sense of language, in the atomic sign of the Ram, Aries, with the sense of the body of the muscles and bones, in the epoch of Ishiachar, which is lost. In the level of sub-nature 3, in the sense of thinking, in the atomic sign of Taurus, in the body part of brain, the etheric body, in the epoch of Asher, lost. In the level of sub-nature 3, in the sense of the eye sense, for the eye of others, the atomic in the sign of Gemini, with the body part of Skin, in the epoch of Joseph, Ephraim, lost, and Manasseh, lost. The three cosmic powers play a role in all aspects of our lives. They are extensively described in the anthroposophical medical system as the three basic poles: the nervous and mental system, thinking; the rhythmic system, feeling; the metabolic, muscular, skeletal system, willing. It is, however, crucial that we understand that this template can also be applied to the 12 senses, especially when considering the steps towards spiritual initiation known as imagination, the 4 physical senses of touch, life, movement and orientation; inspiration, the 4 soul senses of smell, taste, temperature and vision; intuition, the 4 spiritual senses of hearing, speech, thought and the sense of perception of self in and with others. The senses described by Steiner are extremely complex formations, as they show both an outward and inward flow direction. For example, the eyes that perceive the cosmos transmit also an outward, ethereal stream. It is a general spiritual rule that every movement automatically creates a counter-movement. This law even includes time, the 2 opposite streams. According to Rudolf Steiner, the energy flowing in through the sensory organs builds up the whole body, except the head, which is organized according to forces originating from the earth. As he says in the agricultural course he gave in Kurbowitz on June 16, 1924, quote, "Now all the substances contained in the head system, I am speaking of animals, but the same is true of man, are of earthly matter. Even in the embryo, earthly matter is led into the head system. The embryo must be so organized that its head receives its matter from the earth. In the head, therefore, we have earthly matter. But the substances which we bear in the metabolic and limb organization, those which permeate our intestines, our limbs, our muscles and bones, etc., these substances do not come from the earth, but from what has been absorbed from the air and warmth above the earth. It is cosmic substantiality. This is important. When you see an animal's claw, you must not think of it as having been formed by the food which the animal has eaten and which has gone to the claw and been deposited there. This is not the case. It is cosmic matter taken up through the senses and the breathing. What the animal eats serves only to stimulate its powers of movement so that the cosmic matter can be driven into the metabolic and limb organization, can be driven into the claw and similarly distributed throughout the whole organism. With forces, as opposed to substances, it is the other way around, because the senses are centered in the head and take in impressions from the cosmos. The forces in the head are cosmic in nature. To understand what happens in the metabolic and limb organization, you need only think of walking, which means that the limbs are permeated with earthly gravity. The forces are earthly ones. Thus, the limb system contains cosmic substances permeated by earthly forces. It is extremely important that the cow or the ox, if used for working, should be fed so as to absorb the greatest possible amount of cosmic substance, and that the food which enters its stomach should produce the necessary strength to lead this cosmic substance into its limbs, muscles and bones. It is equally important to realize that the earthly substances in the head have to be drawn from the food which has been worked upon in the stomach and is led into the head. In this sense, the head relies upon the stomach in a way in which the big toe does not, and we must realize quite clearly that the head can only work upon this nourishment which comes to it from the metabolism, if it can at the same time draw in sufficient cosmic forces. If, therefore, animals, instead of being left in stuffy stables where no cosmic forces can reach them, are led into meadows and given every opportunity of entering into relation with their environment through the perceptions of their senses, then we may see good results." End quote. The 12 sensory organs are developed in the physical, material body, and they have their spiritual counterpart in both the physical, blueprint, the etheric and the astral body. In the physical body we can find the sensory organs that tell us about the physical world. In the physical body's blueprint, where we can also find the eye organization, there are the sensory organs construction that can be used by our ego, of our conscious soul, and also of our intuitive clairvoyance, but also of the azuric counterforces. In the etheric body we can find the sensory organs that can be used by our imagination, by our etheric body, by our intellectual soul, but also by the Ahrimanic counterforces. In our astral body we can find the sensory organs that can be used by our inspirative clairvoyance, by our soul body, by the emotional soul, but also by the luciferic powers. The part of the 12 senses that can be used by the powers of Lucifer, Ahriman and the Asuras is in close relationship with our doppelgangers in a unique way. The human or karmic doppelganger uses the physical sense organ as used in the material world. The Ahrimanic and Luciferic doppelgangers and the electronic doppelganger, whom I assume is related to the Asuric doppelganger, create their own spiritual parts of the spiritual sensory organs. The Ahrimanic sense organ is formed deeper inside the body, a few centimeters within the material body. This, of course, varies individually. The Luciferic counter-image of the sense organ is more superficial than the organic material organ, as it is formed in the astral body. It can be as much as 10 centimeters outside the body. The Asuric sense organ I see as a kind of periscope around the physical organ. It is much harder to see than the other three, physically, ethereal, and astral. For example, regarding the eye, the Ahrimanic sensory organ is about 1 centimeter behind the body's material eye structure, while the Luciferic is about 10 centimeters in front of the eye. I perceive the Ahrimanic structure with my clairvoyant ability as a greyish structure that resemble a tin plate as described by H.C. Andersen in The Lighthouse. In Ibsen's play Peer Gynt, one finds an interesting introduction to such an eye. A form of surgery is even described to open the Ahrimanic eye, where an incision can be made into the eye to change the appearance of the opposing powers and make us believe that everything we see is beautiful. And in the example of Peer Gynt, to assure the Troll King about that a marriage between Per and the daughter of the Mountain King is possible. These structures are also activated and developed by looking at electronic displays. From what here is said, there are 3 aspects of all 12 sensory organs, 1 related to and developed by both ourselves, and 2 related to the doppelgangers. Add the information that each sense organ is involved in both an outgoing and an incoming stream, we arrive at the conclusion that we are actually faced with 72 power flows or properties that must be considered when we want to understand our sensory functions. Note that all 12 senses can create a spiritual observation in all parts of the cosmos, in the etheric, astral, and spiritual, related to both thinking, feeling, and will. For example, if the spiritual eye is developed in the etheric field, we refer to the ability called etheric clairvoyance. Sight. The first sensory organ I will discuss is the eye, which is the basis of vision and also fundamental in the ability of imagination and clairvoyance, clear sight. Regarding the eye as a physical organ, I have observed that when one sees a living object, especially in nature, the angels in the higher spiritual hierarchies also share the observation. I have also observed that the sensory organs that have little fat in them, such as the eye and the ear, have a stronger affinity for the etheric and thereby the imaginative. But when you observe the screen of a mobile phone, the observations are made deeper in the body. They lose their colours, they become dead and Ahrimanic, and the humanness disappear from them. I have also observed that when someone looks at pornographic images on the data or the mobile phone, another eye is activated, which is located approximately 8 to 10 centimeters in front of the physical eye. That is the Luciferic eye located in our astral body. Regarding the presence of Lucifer and Ahriman in our vision, I can observe this effect when someone is engaged in the virtual electronic world. I find that both demons thrive in the electronic world, including the internet, artificial light, LED screens, computer monitors and cell phones. This is also described in Paul Emberson's From Gondeshapur to Silicon Valley, Volumes 1 and 2. While the opposing powers such as Lucifer and Ahriman will be able to participate in this underworld via electronics, handwriting is a safer option for communication as it is under the angels' domain. The strength of these doppelgangers is woven into the sensory observation. Paul Emberson argues that the use of computers stimulates the strength of the opposing powers so that they can take a stronger hold on our existence. For example, if one sees a movie, it will actually strengthen the eye of the Ahrimanic doppelganger, which lies deeper in the body than the organic eye. Or if we see astral films, which we often do today, it will strengthen the eye of the luciferic doppelganger lying in the astral body, outside the physio-material body. As mentioned above, this Ahrimanic eye is grey and large, resembling that of a tin plate. In 1917, Steiner addressed his concern to his audience about going to the cinema. See GA 175. He describes that the eyes of those watching a movie take on the senses of Ahriman. I have observed that children develop a special affiliation with and understanding of the Ahrimanic powers when they are working with the iPad and iPhone and the like. It seems to me that the Ahrimanic and luciferic forces concerning their doppelgangers will, through much use of electronic media, become more and more sophisticated. The healthy spiritual powers, unlike the adversarial forces, avoid electronic devices that create a dissolution of healthy social connections among people. An even more sinister connotation lies in the growing lack of ability to promote our goal of spiritual initiation through the process of imagination, inspiration and intuition. Therefore, we must carefully try to limit electronic communication in our daily lives by minimizing the use of email, Facebook and other forms of social media. Our soul life, our etheric life and our physical bodies depend on it. We must protect our future now, both for ourselves, for our children, and also for the spiritual future of mankind. As Goethe wrote, the sun created our human eyes. Likewise, the existence of virtual media and electronic devices will create and lay the foundation for the need for an Ahrimanic eye. Hearing. In today's society, we meet electronic music in all places, at all times, and in all forms. Hearing as transcendental sense is also one of the two senses that remained in Israel with man in ancient times. Opposition forces attacks via hearing are among the oldest forms of attack, which began with the discovery phonograph made by T.A. Edison in 1877. It was the prelude to audio discs, LPs, CDs, and now MP3. In this technology, the voice is removed from its original ethereal relation to the larynx, the human creative part, which in the future will be responsible for the procreation of man himself, around 6000 AD. When I observe people who listen to music that has gone through a disc or via amplifiers, I see that they hear with an ear lying either 1 centimetre inside or 10 centimetres outside from the physical ear, that is, in the Ahrimanic or luciferic realms. I was at an evening concert at Midias in Sandefjord, where classical grand piano and opera singing were to be performed for a smaller gathering. I thought this would be without amplifiers, but alas, it wasn't. I observed the ears of the listeners, and although the music was of superior quality, it was mostly in the luciferic ear that the activity took place. Going to concerts is almost no fun. A short description of a church concert, observed from a clairvoyant and anthroposophical viewpoint. On the 27th of March 2019, there was a church concert in Sandefjord Church consisting of old national religious songs by Sondre Bratland, and organ and grand piano were played by Ivar Cleve. Both musicians were of high standard, considered the best in Norway. The organ and partly grand piano had no electronic amplifiers, but the singer, Sondre Bratland, was using a microphone, amplifier and 2 huge loudspeakers. As this concert was performed with about half of the music going through the amplifier and half going directly, analog, and as in half of the performances there was no clapping and in half of the performances there was clapping, it was in this way a unique opportunity to observe the effect of both clapping and amplifiers as compared to live music and no clapping. The results and conclusions were as follows. 1. Music directly from the instrument or vocals creates beautiful elemental beings, elemental energies and forms. 2. Music via amplifiers creates quite different elemental beings, much more Ahrimanic. 3. Clapping after a performance shatters and destroys the beautiful artistic beings created by the analog performance. I guess that is why it was forbidden to applaud religious expressions in the church when I grew up, so as not to destroy the religious elementals. 4. Clapping after music performed through amplifiers strengthens the Ahrimanic elementals. I tried after the final musical performance, which was both analogous and electronic, so that both types of elementals were created, to create a sheltered ring around myself where no clapping was allowed, as I myself never clap anymore. This was the first time I have tried to make such a protective ring or shield. The effect of this shield was that the fragile artistic elementals sought refuge there and were saved. Feeling, the third sensory organ, which is actually a triumvirate of the touch, temperature and eye senses. I will discuss here what is considered the skin. The physically related organ associated with these senses, for example the skin, is interestingly divided into 3 layers: epidermis, leather skin, dermis, corium, and subcutaneous, hypodermis, subcutis. It is important in this context to note that the skin is the active sense organ of both the sense level of the physical imagination, as the sense organ of touch and is in the zodiac Cancer, and the physical tissue of the skin, the epidermis. 8 is the soul inspiration, which has the sense organ of temperature, which has the zodiac sign of Aquarius, and the physical tissue of the skin, corium. The 12 spirit, intuition, has the sense organ of the eye senses in the zodiac sign of Gemini and has the physical tissue skin, subcutis. We should remember here that Steiner emphasized that the good forces of the future come from the Pisces Virgo, the morning-evening forces, while the forces of the opposing force come from the midday and midnight forces that flow to us from Gemini, midday forces that can be abused by the occult fraternities in the West, and from the Sagittarius midnight forces that can be abused by the occult fraternities in the East. So here we see that in the spiritual dimension, in the very highest sense, the I sense then, a transfer of this sense to the Ahrimanic forces, will cause these to make use of the forces that come from the Gemini, related to the skin. Perhaps that is why Joseph handed his dominion over this sense to his sons. What is it that we conceive or meet in the spiritual world after crossing the threshold and opening our eyes? Elemental beings. To understand the concept of alien beings, nature beings and demons, we have to describe and define what are elemental beings. To do so and to understand this, we have to adapt to a totally spiritual worldview. That means we have to accept that behind all matter, all living creatures, all animals, all flowers, and even behind all man-made things like machines and cars, there is a spiritual reality that is primary, and that this spiritual reality consists of living beings of different kinds. These living beings are the elementals as described under numbers 1, 2 and partly 3 in the following table. Then we also have to accept that there are several hierarchies of spiritual beings, both elementals and higher beings, that exist without expressing themselves in material phenomena. They are described under number 4 and partly 3. I must also add that within groups 1, 2 and 3, there are numerous spirits without any present physical and material expression. For example, the elementals of bacteria, viruses, parasites, or animals that are extinct, who search for other homes that they have lost. Such spirits or elementals are called homeless spirits, and they can cause much harm within medicine and life. They should be pitied and helped, but as their homes are lost, it is not easy to help them. Relating to this list, I must add an explanation about what I call demonic elementals. These are either created by the evil actions of human beings, or they are inverted or deformed nature elementals, caused by the actions of earlier species of human beings or demonic powers. The main group, the hierarchies of elementals, spirits and demons in my worldview are as follows. 1. Sub-nature spirits. First elemental realm, what the total earth and cosmos consist of. Elemental beings, spirits, demonic beings. Second elemental realm, what the elements of the periodic system in its foundation consist of. Elemental beings, spirits, demonic beings. Third elemental realm, entities that we usually see as entities in the nature. Elemental beings, spirits. 1. Gnomes, earth elementals. 2. Sylphs, water elementals. 3. Undines, air elementals. 4. Salamanders, fire elemental. 5. Time elementals. Demonic elemental beings, demons. 1. Gnomes, demonic, also created from earth-powered electricity. 2. Sylphs, demonic, also created when electricity is created from water power. 3. Undines, demonic, also created when electricity is created from wind power. 4. Salamanders, demonic, also created when electricity is created from solar power. 5. Demonic time elementals. 2. Ordinary nature spirits. Crystal spirits living in rocks. In ordinary crystals, spirits in toxic crystals resembles demonic beings. Plant spirits living in plants. In ordinary plants, in poisonous plants, resembles demonic beings. Animal spirits, animal group souls, relates to astral spirits and can be both demonic and spiritual. 3. Human spirits. Human souls both in life, as you and me, and those between death and a new rebirth. 4. 9 hierarchies of angel spirits. 9th hierarchy, angels, demons of the rank of angels, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 8th hierarchy, archangels, demons of the rank of archangels, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank, for example, Lucifer. 7th hierarchy, archi, demons of the rank of archi, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 6th hierarchy, exousiae, demons of the rank of exousiae, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank, for example, Zorat. 5th hierarchy, dynamis, demons of the rank of dynamis, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 4th hierarchy, Kyriates, demons of the rank of Kyriates, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 3rd hierarchy, thrones, demons of the rank of thrones, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 2nd hierarchy, cherubim, demons of the rank of cherubim, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. 1st hierarchy, seraphim, demons of the rank of seraphim, retarded beings, actually belonging to a higher rank. The Trinity, the three logi, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.